Good morning or good afternoon, and welcome to IAP2's Learning Webinar. We're really pleased today to be bringing you digital engagement, which is one of our Denver Encores. Yes, these four gentlemen had the opportunity to present at our IAP2 conference in Denver, Colorado this September. So we're really, really pleased to be welcoming them back. So, as I said, Happy New Year to everyone on behalf of IAP2 USA, IAP2 Canada, and IAP2 Australasia. So with that, Drew, we're actually going to get going, and I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of housekeeping, please.
Yes, indeed. And because it's a packed program today, I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible.
Drew, are you with us?
Yes, and yes. And I'm hoping everyone can hear me on this one. We're going to try to get through this as quickly as possible. This is our opportunity to learn a lot from this, and because of that, we've got some questions for you. You're encouraged to ask questions of our presenters as well. And to do that, let me just quickly show you. As you look at your control panel, you're going to see the little yellow hand icon that you can click. If you've got a question, you can do that. And we're going to keep all your microphones muted for the time being. But if you want to break in and ask a question, click that little hand icon. And when there's an appropriate break, Amelia will jump in and come to you, and then we'll unmute your microphone and you can ask your question. Or if you are the shy and retiring type, you can also use the chat box and type your question into that, and Amelia will ask that question when it's an appropriate time. Also comments, whatever comments you've got, whatever things you need to share about your experiences with digital engagement, that's another way to do that as well, either through the microphone or through this. This is being recorded, and so we'll make that recording available to you in the next 24 hours. We also circulate a little survey to you, so that just some general questions so that you can help us to continue to improve these webinars. They're becoming more and more popular. This one is just about sold out, and the more we can do to improve them, certainly the better it will be for IAP2 members and those who are joining us who are not IAP2 members. So with that, Amelia, I will hand this back to you, and we'll get this party started.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Drew. As I said, we're really pleased to be welcoming everyone to this webinar today. So I think this is somewhat of a different webinar, as it's going to be very much a panel conversation. We have asked all of our, we've provided questions to all of our panelists today. So they have been preparing answers to those questions. But as Drew said, we really are looking forward to getting questions from you, our audience, and make sure that we're addressing any needs that you may have also. Drew, I'm just going to get you to switch to the other PowerPoint now, so that people are aware of the different types of questions that we're going to be asking in today's presentation. So these are the questions, as mentioned, that we did ask the gentleman to respond to. So you can take a look right now so that you know what we're going to be asking, and you can also be thinking about what else do you need to know. So these are the questions we've asked, and you're going to think about a little bit about other questions that you might want to know. So I do want to let you know that the first question is very much from their perspective. So I'm going to be introducing Matt, Dave, Joe, and Charles in just a few minutes, but I want to let everyone know that we specifically wanted to give each of these gentlemen an opportunity to speak about digital engagement from their perspective, and that can be talking a little bit about what they do, what they think, what they consider. So they will each be given 5 minutes to reflect on that, and then we will subsequently get into the other questions that we have here. So we hope that this is going to meet your needs. It's certainly, the questions are based on things that we've heard before, and also at the Denver conference. But before we get going and before I introduce our speakers, we're going to run some poll questions. So Drew, can you get that first poll question up there for me, please? So we would like all of you to help us out so that we understand who's in the audience, who's participating today. So if you could just take a couple of seconds to respond to that, and please let us know. If you're not one of these individuals that we've identified, pop it into the question box, and I can let Matt, Dave, Charles, and Joe know who you are. So Drew, let's close that. Let's see who we've got. All right. So most of us on the call today are practitioners. So very cool. Nice to see that we've got some decision makers, and just the other didn't pop it into the question box. So if you've got a chance, don't hesitate to send it in the question box and we'll share it with others. So let's get the next poll questions up there. All right. In which sectors do you work? And as Drew's got up here, you can certainly check more than one box. But this is certainly going to help our presenters in understanding and making sure that they're delivering perhaps some ideas or examples that might meet your needs. All right, Drew, I'm thinking that everyone probably has had an opportunity to respond, so let's see that. All right, so we've got a lot of government people on at 77%. Education at 19, healthcare at 16, the resource sector at 25, and transportation or utilities at 30%. So that's great. Thank you for that. Last poll question coming up. So presenters, I hope you're getting a bit of an idea of who's on the call right now. All right. So what are your top engagement priorities? And you can choose more than one. So increase participation, engage a broader demographic, collect informed input on public preferences, generate support for decisions, obtain actionable data. All right, hopefully, maybe just give a few more seconds for this one. All right, hopefully people have responded. Drew, let's hear. All right. So increased participation at 65%, a broader demographic at 74%, informed input at 72%, generate support for decisions, so a lower number on this at 31%, and obtain actionable data 43%. Great. Well, gentlemen, I hope that that gave you a little bit of an understanding of who your participants are on today's webinar. And with that, I'm going to start introducing our 4 speakers. As I mentioned, they have 5 minutes to do a quick presentation, and then we'll go into the panel conversation. We're going to start with Matt, then we're going to go to Dave, Joe, and then Charles. But let's start with Matt. So Drew, if you could start to hand Matt the screen, that would be great. So Matthew Crozier is a co-founder and is CEO of Bang the Table, who have spent the past 10 years providing the online engagement platform Engagement HQ to government clients in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the USA, and UK. Bang the Table works with over 300 government organizations and advocates a capacity-building, non-transactional approach to engaging communities. So with that, Matt, we're going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Amelia. Hello, everyone. So the first question, what does digital engagement mean to me, kind of made me smile a bit. I think the first thing I want to say is it's probably about time we stopped thinking about online engagement and traditional engagement as face-to-face engagements now. And I think we all know that there's a lot of innovation in face-to-face engagement, and there's a lot of elements now that we're sort of 10 to 15 years into using it of online engagement that aren't particularly innovative, but are very useful. So the first thing I'd like to say is that I think as an industry, we need to be thinking about all the engagement tools that are available to us and where online tools and face-to-face tools fit into a mix. And if you actually look at online tools and why on earth you would use them, there are a couple of very simple answers in my mind. The first is that you can reach a lot more people. And I would contend that online tools are the only way that you can take your engagement from talking to tens or maybe hundreds of people into the thousands and tens of thousands. I've never seen any other methodology of achieving that unless you want to spend a great deal of money on phone surveys. And frankly, surveys are a little bit dissatisfying in terms of the extent to which people feel interacted with. So that first thing is that online tools are really critical in how you reach more people. And the second thing is that they're the way that allow us to broaden our engagement and get a lot more thoughtful response from the community, and to engage with the community at times when the community is ready. And, you know, some of this is about becoming a bit less transactional. I'm probably not doing anyone in our industry any favors when I describe typical engagement as being a 4 to 6 week period in a lengthy project, and so the community, people appear to switch on, switch off, switch on, switch off, sometimes over a period of years. And if you're in the community and you're not ready to engage at a time when the project needs your input, you're left to go off elsewhere. And of course, one of the problems we have in the modern era is that the elsewhere is often social media, and the people that those people go and engage with often are people who have an agenda around your project, and perhaps you'd rather they were talking to you instead of them. So online tools give us that ability to very easily take our engagement from a short period of time to a very long period of time without actually dramatically increasing the resources that we put into it. So just to illustrate that, I want to show you the website. I'm not going to dig in and show the tools at work and things like that, but this is just a website for the Vancouver Airport Authority, who are doing a master plan for the city of Vancouver Airport. Now, this site's been live, I think, for just over 4 years now, throughout the life of the project. And there have been different ways to engage on the site. On our platform, we have 8 engagement tools, and we think that that's, you know, it's a good number for being able to always offer a way to engage that suits the stage of the project you're at. I think you'll all recognize that most projects go through different stages of the IAP2 spectrum. Sometimes you're informing, sometimes you're consulting, occasionally you're empowering, but different projects do different things at different times, and you need to be able to switch on and off the right tools online so that you're engaging people in the right way for the stage of the project you're at. And what Vancouver Airport did is they've always had the ability to engage, even if it's just the ability to ask and see publicly answered your questions about the project. They don't get an influx all the time. They've gone through 4 full engagement stages now, but it leaves a very transparent track record, and these guys have been able to be reassured since the beginning of the project that they are there and answering the community's questions, so people don't have to go elsewhere to find out about it. So you create a very informed relationship with the community, but also the ability to go deeper. And this is the last thing I'd want to talk about, is that ability to go deeper, because I think we all know that online tools are not the deepest form of engagement. At best, they, are a great way to get people's thoughts, to get people's ideas, to get people involved in the process. But really, to go deep, you want to get them in the room. I mean, there's nothing will ever replace getting people in the room to engage them. And so the other thing I think is really important with online engagement, and I'm going to flick to this is the City of Port Collins' site, and you can see here they're engaging with the community on a whole number of projects. And this is about building community. So a lot of what we try and do, particularly with our government clients, is engage regularly and often. And although that engagement within the government organization by its nature is quite transactional, because you work on projects and you have to engage on the projects, the sum of the whole is that you're also building something for the organization. You're building a community, because every time people sign in, come to join in, give you their details, give you permission to talk to them, you're building that database of people in the community. You're building that group of people that you can get back to and bring back for the next project. And you're also able to close the loop with them very easily and let them see that you are actually interested in honoring the views that they're giving to you. So I think this is the other thing that digital engagement means to me, is it's that opportunity to go beyond just very quick bursts of activity with the community and actually build a relationship. And I'm just going to finish by popping you into a relationship, a participant database. This is on our demo site. We never give away our clients' user information, but I just wanted to show you that you can sort through here and create lists based on things that people are interested in. And you can reach out to just those groups and things like that. And this is, I think, sorry, Amelia, I will shut up. This is where we need to just be thinking about online engagement as a means to an end of building that capacity in our communities. Thanks.
Thanks so much. I know I make it tough when I give you gentlemen only 5 minutes, but thank you for that, Matt. We're now going to go to Dave, and Dave Biggs is Chief Engagement Officer of MetroQuest. He's an internationally recognized speaker, author, and public engagement strategist, focusing on the use of software tools to enhance community participation for planning projects. With over 20 years of experience on a wide range of award-winning projects with government clients and consulting firms, he has built a reputation for leading-edge community outreach. Dave is honored to serve as an advisor on best practices for public involvement to agencies and industry organizations from coast to coast. So with that, Dave, over to you for your 5 minutes and your thoughts on digital engagement. So Dave, we just need you to unmute yourself. There we go.
I was muted by the organizer, so I couldn't unmute myself. Well, I was clicking it. Well, hello, everyone, and I wanted to give you a short 5-minute kind of tour of MetroQuest to basically explain what online engagement means to me. First, I'll begin with just being really dedicated to serving the needs of who it is that uses MetroQuest. And so a lot of what I think about online engagement is colored by the needs of government agencies that use the tool across the United States and as well as Canada, as well as a variety of consulting firms, primarily that work for government agencies on community outreach. Over the course of the years, we have taken a very research approach to this, and we continually poll agencies about what success looks like for them, and really have designed MetroQuest to optimize as much as we can for the top goals of agencies that we hear over time. And really, what it boils down to is agencies are looking for maximizing participation, and really that means achieving a much broader demographic of participation, but also just the critical mass, the numbers, achieving informed input, so making sure that the input coming in is trustworthy. And then by doing those together, that is what they've told us gives them actionable results that they actually can take to decision making with confidence. So really, we designed MetroQuest around that, and so there, you'll see, as I demonstrated, a number of things that we've done to keep the experience very, very frictionless, very short, but also to pack education into each step and do it in a way that's fun and playful so that it will become popular and people will share it and so forth. So with that, I'm going to switch over to a very brief demonstration of what it looks like when it's in the wild. You'll see that we have a variety and a very wide set of different screen types that you can pick from in order to create a site. And so let me just go and show you what that looks like. So here you'll see this particular site was being used for a comprehensive plan. The welcome page gives you a brief introduction to the project. And then the first step is usually what's important to you. So here is a very quick way for people to set their priorities, and it really sets a nice tone that it's about them. And so, you know, online engagement really means like capturing people where they are. And then we can go into a bit of a visual preference survey, so you can see that kind of fun and visual is what we're going for here, and something that's a delight to navigate around. And the next step here is being able to annotate on a map what you like and dislike about the community. In this case, you can subdivide and talk specifically about what the benefits and the trade-offs associated with different types of development are. You could really put anything that you want in these categories. And then finally, we ask at the end for people's identifying information, and we find that asking them at the end, we're much more successful in getting that as opposed to requiring them to register before they participate. I'm going to show you just a couple of other screen types that I think really make the point about that informed input that we've heard from clients so frequently. This allows people to look at different scenarios of development in this particular government agency, and you can see that people are learning about the pros and cons of these different options before they're being asked to weigh in. Another strategy is to actually show people what is being proposed and having them weigh in on which ones they would like to fund. You can add up and keep people honest about how much they spend. You can have budget games where people can allocate funds to different, thanks Amelia, and you can play balance the budget games for coming up with different ways of balancing the budget. So you can see that we're trying to be playful, but also inform people about things like trade-offs associated with different choices.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dave. Really, really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
And I really would encourage, the really nice thing about all four gentlemen that you're going to meet today is they'd be more than happy to talk to you in more detail at any point in time. So anything that you're seeing, if you want more information, if we can't respond to you today on today's webinar, we would certainly encourage you to follow up with either of these gentlemen directly. But with that, we're going to turn things over to Joe Thornley. Joseph is co-founder of 76 Engage, a next-generation engagement platform used by government institutions at the local, state, and national level. He and his team have provided the platform and support for online engagements by Cap Metro in Austin, Metrolinx in Toronto, the Doctors of BC, Accessibility Directorate of the Government of Ontario, Canada Revenue Agency, and many, many more, including the governments of Newfoundland and BC. Joseph is also a member of the IAP2 Celeron board and hosts the Inside P2 podcast, which focuses on P2 in the US, Canada, Australia, and the UK, and blogs at propr.ca. So with that, Joseph, over to you about what your thoughts are on digital engagement. So just make sure
yes,
that
it always
there we go.
helps if I take myself off mute, doesn't it?
It's good.
I'm hoping you can see my screen. So I'm a Canadian who believes in the power of government to help the whole of society. And I'm really glad that there are so many people from government on this call, because for me, online engagement is our last best hope to rebuild trust between citizen and government institution. But to do that, we really need to focus on meaningful engagement. So let me take a little bit of time to talk with you about what I believe is meaningful engagement and what we try to build into all of our engagement.
Joe, we just lost you. You've muted yourself again, so
okay.
There we go.
It's really important that, first of all, when we're talking about meaningful engagement, let's not confuse marketing with engagement. Yes, there is room for marketing, but I think Matt referred to this. It's not about, can I get everybody to agree with me? It's about genuinely wanting to hear from people about how they feel about things. And that means asking about things that you're genuinely open to consider, not the things where you don't see that the public has a role or where the decisions have already been made. Therefore, that means asking about things on which the public is qualified to offer you an opinion. Things where their lived experience will inform your factual investigation, or things in which their attitudes will help you to discern between two potential futures. The next thing for meaningful engagement, I think, is to express things in language participants use. I spent a lot of my time around regulatory bodies, and yes, lawyers do really well there because they speak the language of government. But this is not about getting the public to speak our language. It's about us speaking in terms the public understands, and then committing to listen and consider. Not necessarily to agree, but to listen and consider. With that, as much transparency in decision-making and the decision makers as possible, and a report on decisions and how input was considered. To me, that's the full suite. That's the full checklist for meaningful engagement, and we can indeed capture that when we are scheduling online engagements. Let me give you a little bit more in terms of effective online engagement. From my perspective, we need to be native to the digital flow and form. People are on their handheld device, they are on social media, so be native to the way they do that. It's not about websites anymore. Provide contextual information contiguous with the input opportunity. In other words, death to the 250-page PDF download. Give them information in the same way that they're used to consuming it, and think mobile first. You want a seamless flow from social because they're coming from social. That's how you'll promote things, and that means finite, manageable pieces that they can consume over time. Having mentioned social, I think my plea to everybody in government is do not entice people to volunteer information to ad-driven platforms. If it hasn't become abundantly clear in the last year how they harvest our gestures, they do, and they profit from it. Use social media, but only for promotion. Build up your trusted relationship with people. Gather the information on your platform where you can guarantee them that they will not be sold or rented out. Finally, and I think that Matt was referring to this as well, build a relationship with interaction over time. First of all, it allows for longitudinal analysis over time and across subjects, and repeated interaction is the bedrock of building trust. So from my perspective, that's why I'm into, that's why I want to be good at online engagement, and I'm really delighted that so many of you are here today to talk about it.
Thanks so much, Joe. Really appreciate that. And our last gentleman for the 5 minutes is Charles. Charles Connell is the founder of Social Pinpoint, which is a web-based community engagement platform offering a range of interactive tools to make it simple for the community to get involved and participate in local planning. Charles has extensive experience in a wide range of online engagement projects, having been involved in over 500 projects as the co-founder of Social Pinpoint, a global leader in the engagement software. Coming from a technical background and then studying community engagement, he provides a unique perspective to those who are looking to become more familiar with new online methods. So Charles, over to you.
Oh, I'll try that again. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Amelia, and thanks for having us. So as Amelia said, we focus on online engagement. I'm originally from Canada. I've been living in Australia for about 15 years, I guess. I sort of spend my time between Australia and Canada. As most people are probably aware, if they follow online engagement, Australia was probably a little bit ahead of some other parts of the world as far as adopting online engagement. So it's been a great place to sort of develop online engagement tools and then roll them out to the rest of the world. It's currently very early in the morning over here in Australia, so if I don't sound as animated as I sometimes otherwise do, apologies. And also we just had a major electrical storm pass, so if I drop out for some reason, that's probably why. So Social Pinpoint, we developed a tool around 3 or 4 years ago. I'm not going to go into too much detail about, you know, the why we need online engagement and the benefits. I think the other guys have covered that really well. So I'll just give you a bit of a quick run through on some of the stuff that we do. But basically, the concepts for our digital engagement platform came out of frustration, and the frustration was probably twofold. So when we talked to the broader community, there just seemed to be a lot of frustration around the fact that, you know, there were major infrastructure, construction, planning, government projects happening all around them. Yet often people felt like they didn't know what was happening. You know, you drive past the project, you're not sure exactly what's going on. And also you're frustrated because you're not given the opportunity to be involved in the planning and decision-making process. And I'm sure we've all felt like that. When we talked to the organizations running these projects, they were also frustrated, and they were frustrated because they wanted to tell people what was happening. They wanted to involve them, you know, bring them in on the planning and decision-making process. So I guess what we identified was there was a need for better tools. And online, obviously, in you know, today's space is the area that we wanted to focus. We do a broad range of different things, but I'm going to focus today around our location-based engagement tools. They're probably, you know, my personal favorite. And the reason, I guess, is that we tend to find that of all the different tools that we get involved with, they tend to have, can often have the highest impact on the right sorts of projects. Certainly around increasing participation rates and providing better quality data. I think that's what really impresses us, is just the quality of the information you get as soon as you bring that location-based concept. And by location, I mean interactive mapping, interactive images, you know, anything that relates to places. it just allows you to, not only know what the community thinks, but it gives you that extra dimension of where, and that's really quite powerful. Why this works, I guess, as soon as you look at any sort of interactive mapping or imagery or anything that represents the place that a project is actually happening, you get that personal connection. You can see that, there's where my kids go to school, or there's where I work, or there's the park that I go to eat my sandwich at lunch. So it inspires that ownership, which then translates to, both improved participation rates and better data. And there's a concept of fun. People are used to Google Maps and those sort of platforms, and so they're comfortable in that environment already. We work across a broad range of different projects. So right through from transport planning projects to strategic planning, land use planning, community projects, parks and recreation. Right through to things like tourism. And instead of focusing on the specific project types, I just wanted to quickly talk on the project stages, probably that. Just for people to sort of consider when planning their engagement strategy. So what we tend to find is obviously multiple rounds of engagement per project is obviously the best approach. And very broadly, the three areas that we tend to get involved in mostly are that early stage planning, where you're reaching out to the community to either reinforce what you already know, or hopefully, grab some gold nuggets or ideas that you hadn't considered. So usually, when decisions haven't been made, early stage, have your say type projects. We then move on to, more mid-project where you're discussing specific topics. You're starting to make decisions. You're starting to actually, talk about specific things with the public. And then the last one that's great to see that's happening a lot more frequently these days is, closing that loop and actually informing your community and stakeholders about the decisions that have been made. And not only the decisions that have been made, but the process that went into making those decisions. So, showing them how their engagement influence helped, overall direct the decisions.
Charles?
I will, sorry.
You got
I'll just
30
quickly
seconds.
direct you, 30 seconds, that's all I need. Quickly direct you to our socialpinboard.com website. If anyone wants to see examples of these types of projects, jump on there and there's a projects link on our website. From there you can go to any of the specific projects and delve into, seeing how other people are using our engagement tools. And then obviously the back end is quite comprehensive with reporting and all the self-service tools that you'd expect. So yeah, hit us up if you want any more information, and I'll pass it back to you, Amelia. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks so much. So Drew, why don't we get the questions back up on the screen? And we're going to go into a little bit of a panel conversation now. And we do want this to be interactive. So, so I want to make sure that all of you, if you've got any questions, any comments, please add them into the question box, and we'll make sure that we do that. So we've now gone through define online engagement from your perspective, and we're now heading into the second question, please, Drew, on how do we integrate online and offline engagement. So, and I'm going to open this up to all of our panelists. How do we integrate online and offline engagement? Who would like to get started on that?
Well, this is Dave. I'm happy to get going. Or Joseph, did you want to jump in?
Go right ahead,
Dave.
Dave.
Yeah.
So this is relatively top of mind because I recently wrote a blog post about it. I love this question because it is about integrating, and it's not one replaces the other. And I think that's often the case that, when people are talking about online engagement, they think of it as, well, now we can stop doing the face-to-face engagement. And I just think that's a big mistake, because there's so much special about face-to-face that can't really be reproduced. And so I think it is really about integrating. And I think that what I see in some of the best projects is using the best of each. So for example, the blog post that I described a strategy for integrating them that goes like this. You start with online engagement to get a sense of what the broad community feels are the priorities about a certain project or initiative. And then you go to a face-to-face armed with that information about what the public thinks are priorities, and get them to dig in and create with their neighbors and their peers options for the movement forward, whatever it is, and then those options get taken out online again in a third phase where they're crowdsourced and crowd tested by the larger community, knowing that they've been co-created by their peers. So I think it is really about what special can happen face-to-face that only can happen there. And then really face-to-face is about learning from each other and hearing different perspectives. And online is really about getting the broad view of what the public at large across all demographics thinks about different issues.
Thanks. Joe.
Well, you know, I think that real world, real life high touch is important. But that problem is I can't get to the place where that occurs. Does that mean that I can't see what others feel? And so I think that the real potential for online is when we take advantage of video, audio, and we create spaces where we can bring the real life into online. So for example, I don't know whether you have the screen share anymore, but if you don't, you could go to metrolinksengage.com. That's the City of Toronto, Metrolinx, their transit authority. They have a new CEO, and he decided to have a management town hall. They promoted it online. They held it at their headquarters. They invited people to register to participate online or in real life. They took questions online. They took questions in real life. They published the answers to all of the questions, including the ones in the hall, online. They published a video of the town hall online. So even if I couldn't be there, and I was actually in Ottawa, I watched the whole thing. I see the responses. I could have participated. To me, that really is using online to bring our real life interactions out so that we can see them, everyone, whether we're there or not.
Excellent. Thank you. Charles or Matt, just quickly before we go to the next question.
Yeah, I look, everything Dave and Joe said. Sorry, Charles. I'll just say quickly. Look, there are a few things, and you know, there's tons of examples out there of really successful integration. But look, the first thing on my mind is, you know, I do think we get richer interactions face to face. So to me, a first objective of online engagement should be driving more people to those face-to-face events. I think it's really important. And when they get there, making them already informed about the issue because they've been there participating in some way, and perhaps even determining your agenda and the what you're going to discuss at the event based on some of those online discussions. We've seen stuff, particularly I'm thinking of something that a company called Straight Talk did in Australia with us, where they actually used the online discussion to diffuse a really difficult issue so that some of the emotion was gone when they got people face to face. So using the online to support the face to face process. And the other thing I just wanted to throw in, the City of Brampton in Ontario have recently broken some of our participation records, and they basically sent people out with iPads, street teams. And you'll find if you go to their site, which I've forgotten the URL, but I'm happy to send it to anybody afterwards, futurereadybrampton.ca, that there are thousands of contributions that they got from Street Team, and they've entered those into the site, and they've actually then used the face-to-face to stimulate the online discussion as well. So the two kind of feed into each other, and I don't think it's too hard to do these things, and I think all of us are armed with loads of examples, so you should check out all of our blogs on these things.
Excellent. So Charles, I am actually going to go to the next question just so that we make sure that we get everything in. So Drew, if you could just go to the next question for me, please. When complex issues are being addressed, can online engagement be trusted as informed input? Why or why not? So Charles, I cut you off from answering the last question, but would you like to get started on this one?
Yeah, thanks. I think the other guys covered most of the points on the other question anyway. So we do get this question a lot, and I think the answer is yes. And I think you always need to be listening to everybody, regardless of whether it's online or offline. And again, it's back to probably what Joe said earlier. Even if you don't necessarily agree with people, you still want to know what their opinions are. And even if it's not a popular opinion, you still want to know where that's coming from, because you may need to have a plan to, you know, deal with certain individuals or groups. So certainly, you know, consider online engagement for what it is and treat it as another source of valuable input for sure.
Excellent. Thanks. Anybody else about complex issues? And can they be trusted?
Yeah. Amelia, I'd like to give
Okay.
this a giant yes. I mean, actually, online engagement does allow you to, on the same space you're talking to people, provide them with deep and complex information broken down into different ways, videos, slideshows, games. There's all sorts of ways of getting that information to people. So often, actually, the information you're getting is more informed. And the other thing we can do in the online space is actually measure how many people have taken the time to be informed by whatever means of informing them. Again, I'm hoping it's not the PDF document, as Joe mentioned earlier, but whatever means you're using to inform them, you can actually measure how informed they are. And that's actually quite hard to do in a face-to-face environment. So I'd suggest that online engagement, has a huge role to play in getting more informed feedback.
Thanks. Dave or Joe, any thoughts on this question?
We designed our platform really around this question because we were wringing our hands about how in 5 minutes do we teach people enough about an issue to trust the input coming in, because we know that we can't get huge numbers unless we keep the experience very short. And so we've spent years refining these, as Matthew said, game-like interfaces to educate people about pros and cons and trade-offs and so forth. And I think it's absolutely critical that that kind of interactivity and the visuals and the interactive components be a required element, because it's so easy to discount, for example, a multiple choice question because it's just text and people can interpret words differently and so forth. And so I would say a giant yes, but I would also say that there's a great deal of online engagement that does not meet the threshold of informed input because it is easily discounted or misinterpreted if it's a simplistic sort of presentation.
Great. So I will let all of you gentlemen know that we do have a lot of questions coming in from our participants as well. So I am going to keep you going through the questions that we've already got up here. So I am going to switch to the next question now, please, Drew. And I've asked each of you to individually answer one of these questions. And I think first up is Joe regarding anonymity. And how would you respond to some of the concerns around anonymity, Joe?
Well, I think this, thank you very much, Amelia. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the marketer versus the engagement mindset. And it also comes down to what's the difference between Facebook and Twitter, between a place that we will go to and trust and a place that's a cesspool. And it comes down to the fact that I am known for who I am on Facebook, and that's been a great advantage for them. So what we should do, I think, is start out and take the approach that anonymity if necessary, but not necessarily, and hopefully not anonymity. Better engagement, and going back to that previous question, more trusted answers come from knowing who people are, having them invest in you in the same way as you invest in them. If you give them the opportunity, they tell you a bit about themselves, and then you can harvest that over time. I think, of course, sometimes people will say, but I really need a lot of participation. I need big numbers to justify myself to the C-suite. Well, I think that all of us probably would endorse the notion of deferred registration, allowing people to begin to get into a questionnaire and then prompting them as they go through it to register so they can get more information, further communication, giving them something along the way once they've invested enough into it. And that can really work. And then, of course, if you have people who decide not to give you their ID, sequester that information. Never take anonymous information and lump it in with anonymous information, because it is not the same thing.
Thanks, Joe. So moving to accessibility, Matt.
Hey, thanks, Amelia. Yeah, sorry, I was thinking about anonymity. I won't argue with Joe here, but maybe another time we could do that debate, Joe. Hey, so accessibility, look, I'm glad it's on the agenda. I think it's a really important issue. And it's been one of those things, when we get RFPs from government organizations particularly, they always say must be, WCAG2 or whatever the relevant standard is. Accessible, but I don't think anyone ever really takes it seriously. We do quarterly audits, and We work directly with the visually disabled community and do engagement for them. No one has ever asked us to see our audits, apart from the city of Oshawa, who actually have helped us raise the bar even higher. And I'm, super impressed and in debt to them for what they've done with us. And I think people need to have a bit of a deeper think about this. As a society, there are good reasons that we do not engage in ways that exclude disadvantaged groups. I think it's a really important principle. And I think that, people need to start demanding that we don't only say that we're trying to be accessible, but that we actually do something about it. And I think, asking online engagement providers to provide, their most recent audit results, and, having a good look at those. And, if you're getting a blank sheet of paper with a tick on it, then that's not real. Every audit comes back with numerous issues, and what you should be looking to see is a flow of these issues were identified, these issues were fixed last quarter, here are some new ones we found. It's a process that never ends. It's not a steady state, but I do think just that principle that we shouldn't be engaging in ways that excludes disadvantaged groups in our community means we need to take that a little more seriously in the future.
Thanks so much, Matt. So heading into trolls and abusive behavior. Dave.
Yes, this is a fun topic. Well, fun for some and painful for others. In preparation for this, I actually looked up what the definition of a troll was, and I want to read it to you because it's just a gem. In internet slang, a troll is a person who sows discord on the internet by starting quarrels or upsetting people by posting inflammatory, extraneous, or off-topic messages in an online community such as a news group, forum, chat room, or blog with the intent of provoking readers into an emotional response or of otherwise disrupting normal on-topic discussion, often for the troll's amusement. And toxic and abusive behavior is another version of this. And we're seeing a dramatic increase across North America in terms of this kind of behavior in person and online. And so in terms of online, there's really three broad strategies that you can take in order to try to minimize or mitigate some of this abusive behavior. Strategy number one is just simply don't give people a stage and a microphone to grandstand. And so that's the strategy that we've taken with MetroQuest, essentially by not creating an open forum or a chat room, but by focusing on here's the information that we want to provide to you, here's the information that we want to collect from you, and that we don't make that public so people can bias each other or influence each other, which is a concern when you're having open forums. Strategy number two is to allow that kind of open discussion, but monitor it carefully and filter out unwanted behavior. And so that involves extra time, clearly, but it does allow you to pick and choose what kind of behavior is appropriate, and has, as you can imagine, pros and cons. Strategy number three has been tried to limited success, which is essentially having people police each other and identify inappropriate behavior and kind of crowdsource that kind of behavior. It doesn't tend to put many trolls off. They tend to thrive in that kind of environment, but it's a strategy that that people have used in the past. I think that whatever you do, you have to make sure that you yourself, if you're P2 practitioners that are working for clients or whether you're working for an agency, you have to think about the reputation of the agency and how the agency is going to look. And so pick a strategy which as best possible isolates the agency from abusive and embarrassing behavior, but also does not turn people off, because trolls do nothing more than to turn well-meaning people that want to contribute away. So anything that you can do to minimize or neutralize that kind of behavior is going to be very valuable. So when you're looking at different online applications, do ask the question, how is it that people who want to disrupt the system can be neutralized, or how is it avoided in the system?
Thank you so much, gentlemen. So before we come off this, we've had quite a number of questions coming in from participants. And participants, please, if anything that you're hearing you want to delve into a little bit more, please let us know. But I'm going to go into these questions first, and I'm going to invite all four of you to jump in if you've got a response to the question. So the first one's from Jackie. Most of the examples are resource, transport, or utility focused. What new online tools or approaches are there for public policy engagement?
I'm happy to take that if anyone else is jumping in. Look, actually, Jackie, most of the work we do is online policy engagement, working with cities and government departments to discuss policy. Which tools are used depends on which stage of the process you're at. So, you know, if I was prescribing a perfect process, I'd say that, you know, early in a process, when you're dealing with solving an issue, you go and ask the community for their ideas. So you might use an ideation tool, crowdsourcing ideas. If it's a spatial thing, you might use a mapping style tool to do that. And then, you know, you should be there providing information and context and why you're looking at the issue and answering people's questions right through the life of your work. When you've got a draft for the community, that's time for either a survey or a discussion forum, preferably a forum, because it's good to have that open discussion. You know, we've worked with these for 10 years and the trolls aren't all that scary, and we just moderate them and keep it safe. But actually then you can start getting into the nuances of the policy and polishing it. And then when you move through to implementation, you sort of keep a space available, keep answering people's questions and things like that. The other tool that's very useful in policy making right at the beginning, as you look at the issue, is storytelling. Is actually getting people to step out of arguing their point and get them to talk about why they hold that point. So we first did this with the Australian government for the National Disability Insurance Scheme, talking to disabled people and their carers. And the stories that we got were rich, powerful, quite upsetting at times, but they really added value to the process of designing that scheme to address those issues for people. So I hope that's helpful.
Thanks. So I'm just going to quickly jump back for a second. Because I forgot to ask Charles to talk about security. My apologies, Charles. Could you just respond to security, and then if anybody else wants to jump back in on policy, that we can do that. But let's just quickly go back to security for a second.
Absolutely, thanks. So we do get asked a lot about security, and I guess before we delve into the specifics, I just want to maybe put it into perspective a little bit. If you consider some of the things that we do online, banking, shopping, military applications, you know, where we're controlling equipment in the transport industry, you know, some pretty powerful things that require some pretty high level security. I guess my first advice would be take a deep breath and relax a little bit, because most of the security considerations, you know, they've been dealt with before. So, you know, we're not starting from scratch. What I would say, however, is that you do need to consider a few key points. So from a technology point of view, you know, the technology itself is a consideration. So obviously things like SSL security certificates are a must. And again, I could spend an hour talking about just that on its own. But basically, if anyone is not aware of, you know, what that means broadly is, you know, encryption of your data between the user-facing websites and ultimately your servers. You know, so the data has to be secure and encrypted. And there are obviously off-the-shelf, easily implemented ways to do that. The other thing to consider is, and this is going to be specific to both your project and where you're located, the specific legislation and requirements around regional hosting. It's quite often a requirement that your data does have to be regionally hosted. I mean, again, it's dependent on what type of project you're running. Not all projects actually require this, but you know, certainly if you're starting to collect information around personal details, emails, you know, addresses, names, that sort of stuff, definitely, you know, do some research or talk to your provider and they'll advise what the requirements are. Quickly, data ownership. So have a good look at this when you're choosing what platform to use for online engagement. there are some platforms out there, and obviously look at Facebook, where data is ultimately the value of the platform. That's where they're trying to make money, and that shouldn't be the focus when you're dealing with community engagement tools. You should own the data. The organization, but the vendor should never benefit from your data. Robustness of a platform, just have a look. How long has it been around? What's the history? Are there things like penetration testing performed to make sure that the platform's secure? And then finally, security around your own organization. Things like moderation, profanity filters, all those sort of inbuilt controls to differentiate online engagement from social media, for example. Have a good look at what's there, and what you can use to sort of protect yourself and your organization.
Thanks, Charles, and my apologies for missing you.
Right.
We've got about 10 minutes left for questions, so unless anyone's really burning to talk about public policy engagement, I'd like to go on to the next question. All right, so from Lisa. Lisa's asking, social media and digital engagement can strike confusion and fear into the baby boomer demographic, who often can provide some great interaction. What are best digital engagement strategies to engage with this demographic?
Well, this is Dave. We've actually found that over the past 2 or 3 years, we're seeing a very representative participation across all demographics. That was not true 5 or 6 years ago, and I think that the baby boomers are increasingly comfortable. But that being said, I think it's really important to use online engagement in a variety of ways. And so I also, encourage our clients to use a go-to-them strategy, where taking iPads to events where there's a missing demographic or an underrepresented demographic becomes something that really can help you fill in some of those gaps. But I would say that increasingly it's not as much of an issue as it was 5 or 6 years ago. But there's all kinds of ways of taking the digital to them and having a semi-facilitated experience where you perhaps have a table with 6 iPads on it, where you're at an event where there's an underrepresented demographic. You can get people started and be close by while they're participating.
Thanks. Anybody else on the baby boomers?
Pretty much agreeing with what Dave said. I don't think age is particularly a barrier to online engagement. I think actually people should throw out their stereotypes. It's still online hardest to engage the youth, and it's still the youth. Listen to me, I'm so old, and it's still easiest to engage the baby boomers, as far as I'm concerned. We do get a far broader variety, but I don't think people's stereotypes about use of online really apply. Like Dave said, over the last 5 years, everybody's there.
Okay, great. So Catherine.
Just quickly add, Amelia.
Oh, please.
Sorry, just quickly. I think you should treat online engagement as any other website. So if you're trying to target a specific audience, you would do what any other website would do, and that comes down to your marketing strategy. So, if you're trying to reach a particular demographic, you can reach them using different approaches.
Thank you, Charles. And Charles, we can hear you better now. I know there was a comment earlier on that we were having trouble hearing you, but we can hear you better. So Catherine asked about data stored in Canada or another country, and you talked a little bit about that in the security question, Charles, but any thoughts? Because I know certainly in Canada, we often get, unless the data is stored in the country, we can't go with a provider. Any comments, any quick comments on that one?
Yeah, Amelia, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that all of us and all providers store their data locally in every country they work. I'm not aware of any exceptions to that. If you find a provider that doesn't host locally, then you should tell them to. It's easy.
Yeah, certainly that's the case for MetroQuest.
Yeah, and I think I heard Charles and Joe saying the same thing. So great. So here's another question from Jessica. Often we are trying to carry out meaningful engagement on limited budgets. Often we don't have budget for specialized software. I would be curious to hear what others have done in this situation and how they might have appropriately and efficiently summarized the input obtained online.
Well, it's Joe. First of all, knowing that we do competitions against the other three guys on this line, don't assume how expensive online software is. It's a very competitive marketplace, and you can probably afford it. Secondly, if you can't afford it, be careful. Be wary. Going out and getting misleading data on social media sites where, because of their advertising algorithms, you're getting a skewed audience, that can be extremely dangerous to the decision-making process and ultimately could have a really negative effect on your ability to do it again. So my attitude is do it right or do something else, but don't assume that it's going to cost you $500,000. It's not.
Okay. So I'm going to go on to my next two questions, and certainly if anyone wants to reflect back on what we've just heard, you can please do that. So from Francis, what about rural areas with minimal connectivity? Small local government and regional government struggles to use online tools that are also accessible to dial-up internet or slow connection. Any thoughts?
Well, this is Dave again. We recently had a project, and we've actually seen this a number of times in rural areas where if you look at rural areas, there's almost always a meeting spot. And providing a kiosk or an iPad on a stand in one of those meeting spots can be very effective. In one community that I'm thinking about right now, we were able to engage 10% of the entire rural area in one community center with one device. So having, as I said, a go-to-them strategy. Don't expect everybody to discover your website and come online, but put it where they are. Put it in front of them and make it easy for people without a device to participate.
I think Dave's absolutely right.
Sorry, Joe. Go on, Joe.
I'll just very quickly, Dave is absolutely right. And I think this is a brilliant question that I very rarely hear people ask, but they should be more often. Google Analytics, every analytics program provides the opportunity for people who are designing engagements to go and look at how fast their pages are loading and how much bandwidth they're consuming. That should be one of the basic things that any provider, any site is doing all the time. Because going back to accessibility, you can make it accessible to people. You can offer a means for people to get things that don't consume the bandwidth that full video would. For example, on the example I used of Metrolinx and the video, yes, it takes bandwidth to get the video to download, but you can also create a transcript using Google's free tools. So there are ways to get the bandwidth and down to what rural people can actually use, and you should demand that.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to go on to the next question, and certainly, Matt, I heard you trying to jump in, so you can either respond to that or this one. Often it can be difficult to make the case for engagement, let alone online engagement. How can you demonstrate a return on investment on online engagement? Natalia, thanks for that question. Dave.
Oh, yeah,
sorry,
thanks for that one,
Matt.
Natalia. Sorry, I jumped in there. Look, I really what I'd like to say, I mean, that's too long a question to deal with adequately on this webinar, but what I would say is that we've recently published a little ebook about making the case for online engagement that you can get at our website at bangthetable.com. Look, I think really it's about making the case for engagement, frankly. As I said earlier, the only way to broadly engage the community in both, time and in numbers is to engage online. And if we've been making the case for community engagement for a long time, I think it's exactly the same case. Communities are more satisfied with their government organizations when they feel engaged. There's empirical evidence that shows that. We know we make better decisions when we engage better. I saw the poll earlier. I know I'm preaching to the choir with the practitioners on this line. And we know that our projects are less subject to changes, fluctuations, and things like that when we've done our engagement work properly. Those are the business cases. And it's really hard to separate out the online, except to say that a process that doesn't have online engagement is never going to have the reach of one that does.
Thanks. And just, I missed Kristen's question. So just really quickly, can any of these demo platforms be integrated onto an agency's existing website, or are they all their own separate sites? So that's just going back a little bit.
I'll jump in on that one if I can.
Please, Charles.
Yes, I think you'll find that a lot of these platforms both integrate onto existing websites because we're fully aware that you already have a website. You often don't want a second one. And also, a lot of them offer tools like API access, which gives you secure access to integrate to other systems that may just require the data.
Excellent, thank you. Drew, could you go to that last question? And we're going to do a round table from everybody. And Matt, I know to a certain extent you just answered that question. But I'll let the others have a go, and then if you want to add a bit more, please do that. So Dave, as we're wrapping up today's webinar, this is sort of the last question. So last thoughts as we're wrapping up from you, and then we're going to go to Matt. We're going to go to Charles, then Joe, and then Matt. Dave.
Sounds great. Thanks, Amelia, and thanks everybody for participating today. Really enjoyed the session, and I hope you did too. Just building on what Matt said, the question I would ask in terms of making a case for engagement and online engagement as a subset is really, what's the cost of having decisions or plans fail? And it's huge. Plans get scrapped all the time, and oftentimes it can be pointed to inadequate community buy-in or community support, or a demonstration of community support that is lacking. And it's usually there's not enough numbers, there wasn't a broad enough demographic, or we can't trust the information coming in, some sort of criticism along those lines. And so the case for engagement is really to avoid failed plans and to ensure that you have the confidence to make a decision and that you've got the community support. In terms of the business case for online engagement, we always track the cost per participant. And I think that's really where online engagement, and particularly online engagement that's designed for massive appeal, really shines. We have found so many times that face-to-face engagement costs anywhere from $50 per participant to sometimes much more than that. And with many of our projects, it's usually single-digit dollar per participant, and sometimes under $1. So that's part of the business case. Also, when you think about face-to-face engagement, a big part of the hidden cost is what happens after, and tabulating and organizing all the results, which by and large for online engagement happens for you automatically. And so that's another big cost savings and another justification for it. But I would reiterate where I started from, it's not a replacement for other forms of engagement. It's another tool in the toolbox, which is particularly powerful and can be quite cost effective, but it's not the only one. And we need a diversity in order to allow people different styles of engagement to meet their needs.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Charles.
Yeah, I think in general, I think we broadly undervalue community engagement when it comes to project planning and risk mitigation. If you sit down and consider all of the things that could disrupt or derail your project and how they would financially impact on the project, it's pretty quick to start seeing how important community engagement is, and online's obviously a component of that. Just one other quick point I would like to make is people are engaging online regardless of whether you want to, or you have a plan, or you've considered it. They're online. If you don't create a place for them to have that conversation, they're going to go off and do it themselves, and then you lose control. You can't handle misinformation. You don't know where the data is coming from, and ultimately you just lose that information. So important to consider that as well.
Thanks, Charles. Joe.
Well, I think the word trust has come up a great deal today. And the answer to me, when I think about my own company, and I think that you have to, when you're making the case for increased online engagement, you're dealing with people who are thinking about the good of the total organization. And the simple question, what price do you put on increased trust? And that price will be great, I think, with most people. Now, the issue of measurement comes up, and I think that measuring in terms that are an extension of what you'd measure if you were doing your town hall meeting or something in high touch. So we always suggest to people that they measure two things or report on two things. One is attention, not traffic, but attention. Think about it as the same as the number of people who file into the community hall. How many people come, read your information, look at things, are consumers and have engaged? And then the other part is active engagement. How many people actually put their hand up, do the equivalent of walking up to the mic and give you a point of view? If you measure that way and report that way, you can definitely make the case for online engagement, because you will be showing a great increase in both the attention that you're able to get and the active engagement over what you could ever do in a real world environment.
Thanks, Joe. So Matt, any last thoughts?
No, Joe and the others put that absolutely beautifully, and particularly Joe's comments about the way to measure it, I thought were really well made. So I just want to say thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
Excellent. Well, I would like to sincerely thank Matt, Dave, Joe, and Charles for joining us for today's learning webinar. Just a quick reminder to everybody on the line that our February 13th webinar is going to be about handling emotion and outrage. Handling emotion and outrage. So we sincerely hope that you will be able to join us for our February learning webinar. And just a quick reminder, we will be sending out the recording of today's webinar to everyone that's registered for today's webinar. Apparently I'm saying that a lot. We will also include any PowerPoints, any links that the gentlemen would like to share, so that you can follow up with them directly should you have any more questions. So with that, we're going to bring this to a close. On behalf of IAP2 Canada, IAP2 USA, and IAP2 Australasia, a very big thank you, Dave, Charles, Matt, and Joe. And a very big thank you to all of those of you that joined us on today's call. We had about 100 people on today's call. So it was a really successful webinar, and we certainly hope that you did enjoy what you heard. Take care, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye now.